My name is Ulrike Feld. I'm a professor of science and technology studies at the department of the same name at the University of Vienna. My research focuses on the complex relations between scientific knowledge, technological developments, and related transformations of our societies. So, on the ways how we live in innovation societies. I will share aspects of my work related to the triple crisis. After watching this video, you will know about the various forms of waste we throw away every day and how this is connected to our innovation logic. This creates considerable waste legacies and challenges to planetary health. You will also be alerted to the less visible left behinds of our innovations, which are not classified as waste, but which impact our environments and our lives. I call them residues. What are residues? Never thought of that? Consider this. How many photos did you snap with your phone last month? How many will you revisit? Take a moment to think about it. Estimates suggest that around 85% of these photos go untouched. Yet to keep them accessible, they are stored on cloud servers that require huge amounts of electricity, cooling water, and raw materials. I refer to these unused data and all the annex waste as residues of our digital behavior. They are harmful to our planet as much as traditional waste, yet they remain unconsidered. In essence, waste represents just a portion of what we leave behind through our production and consumption of ever new products. Let's return to waste. This video, emphasizing a social science perspective, examines our efforts to define and to regulate waste, to know the kinds of waste we produce, and to understand its movement through societies, all this being crucial for addressing the triple crisis. So what is waste? Sounds like an easy question, everything we throw away. Unfortunately, it is a bit more complex. This is why a number of international bodies, from the United Nations and the OECD to the European Union, have given their definition. The idea behind this is to regulate what waste is, how waste must be dealt with, when waste needs special care, and whether it can circulate without restrictions, to mention just a few elements. The 2008 Waste Framework Directive of the European Union, Article 3, states that waste means any substance or object which the holder discards or intends or is required to discard. Then waste is classified along different dimensions based on the source. So who and what processes generated the waste? What is the substance of waste? So what is it made of? Does waste have hazardous properties? So how dangerous is it? And how can we manage waste? So how do we need to handle it? Defining waste can at times also be a case-by-case decision, and not everything we leave behind is classified as waste under such a directive. For example, wastewater isn't, and contaminated earth is neither. Radioactive materials are regulated separately. In short, living with waste is a complex business. The regulation also fixes a so-called waste hierarchy, which points to the priority that should be given to prevention in the first place. Even though this regulation has been in place for more than 15 years, there is still a lot to be done to reach these goals that are fixed. In 2023, the European Commission proposed an amendment concretizing several issues, specifically textile and food waste. Clothing and footwear waste leads to enormous environmental harm in the EU and in third world countries through excessive levels of greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption, pollution, and land use. The 58.5 million tons of food waste generated in the EU in 2020, to take another example, caused 16% of the total greenhouse gas impact resulting from the EU food system. And food waste also puts unnecessary pressure on limited natural resources. So not to forget, waste is a consequence of our ways of living and of an economic system that incentivizes consumption and measures its success on this value. For a moment, I would like to invite you to follow me and think about waste entirely differently. Certainly, waste has often been seen as a nuisance, a danger, a cause for injustice, and a mark of excess. However, we can also regard it as information. I align with Dietmar Offenhuber, who posits that examining waste through an informational lens does allow us to reflect human activity and the passage of time. We could thus take waste as a lens to understand our present lives, ourselves, and our guiding values. They are mirrored in our waste, in the remnants we leave behind. But waste is not static. It moves through the world. Let's see where waste goes, and let's take the example of electronic waste. All these computers, mobile phones, tablets, toys, and an increasing number of interoperable products capable of connecting to the internet. We are using and regularly discarding them in massive amounts. The Global E-Waste Monitor from 2024 gives us a glimpse into the complex world of e-waste. E-waste is a special waste stream due to its varied nature, which includes a complex composition of materials and components, a broad array of product types, and a rapidly evolving product stream. In 2022, Europe was the region that generated the highest amount of e-waste per capita at 17.6 kilograms. About 40% of this is documented as being collected and recycled, 60% not. The green transition and the connection of off-grid communities will lead to a quadrupling of waste, also from photovoltaic panels, from 0.6 billion kilogram in 2022 to 2.4 billion kilogram in 2030. Where will they go? Will we have the capacity and make the relevant investments to recycle them properly? There are doubts raised that need to be taken seriously. To address problems of consumption and the environment, the European Union has put forward a revised action plan for a circular economy, which promises in 2020 for the coming decades, so until 2030, I quote, to accelerate the transition towards a regenerative growth model that gives back to the planet more than it takes, to advance towards keeping its resource consumption within planetary boundaries, and therefore to strive to reduce its consumption footprint and double its circular material use rate in the coming decade. As a social scientist, I encourage you to consider the importance of language here. This commitment isn't about reaching a final destination. Instead, it is about a promise to foster progress, to strive for reduction. Currently, our efforts are far from effective implementation. So the core idea is to establish a system of production, consumption, and recycling that is sustainable regarding raw material use, design, production, distribution, consumption, and waste management. However, as one can easily imagine, this cycle is challenging to achieve. Multiple stakeholders need to unite behind this vision, yet we already observe numerous setbacks, and these circular streams are leaking in many places along the pathway. Recycling of plastic is a very good example. While being far from the ideal, the recycling itself generates microplastics. Consequently, we should not just build ideas, which is important, but also reconsider our fundamental ideas about growth and consumption. Now let us reflect on our lives with waste with two further concepts: waste colonialism and environmental justice. What does the notion waste colonialism stand for? The notion was created more than 3 decades ago in the context of the Basel Convention by the United Nations, put in place to guide global government efforts to control transboundary movements of hazardous waste, including e-waste. Coined by African nations, waste colonialism captures the phenomenon of exporting hazardous waste from the global north countries into the global south. On the map, we see the flows of electronic waste in 2019, the pink arrows pointing to illegal flows, many of which go to the global south. Initially, the economic benefits of importing waste seemed a line of commerce, but it soon turned into a huge social, health-related, and environmental burden. In June 2022, amendments to the convention were adopted, calling for increasing the control of transboundary movements of e-waste and making all electronic and electric waste subject to the prior informed consent procedure. How this really changes the traffic of waste is to be seen. Finally, let's address environmental justice, which is intricately linked with waste colonialism. This calls for examining the vulnerabilities arising from how waste is produced, managed, and circulated globally. This involves recognizing that environmental risks affect different social groups and locations in unique ways, prompting us to consider more closely who generates waste and who must endure the repercussions. This means ensuring that people worldwide are shielded from environmental harm and protected against negative health impacts. It also means shifting the burden of proof from the victims to the polluters and addressing the consequences through remedial actions. To conclude, we have to be attentive to the intersections of the technical, the social, the cultural, and the natural realms, without allowing any single aspect to dominate the others, particularly not allowing technological innovations and our dominant model of consumption and progress take the sole leading position. Reflecting on waste in today's and tomorrow's societies is undoubtedly a valuable and urgently necessary exercise, and it teaches us a lot about our ways of life and the values we live by.